Chapter 9 Everblaze. The plan had seemed so brilliant until Sophie reached the cold sandy shore. She'd never been to the cave at night, and now she understood why. The roar of the surf sounded like a snarl, and the shadowy rocks looked like faces and limbs. Even the moonlight and the blue glowing sphere Sander had pulled from one of his pockets couldn't convince her eyes that she wasn't stumbling into the lair of giant beasts. Sander led the way, keeping his sword at the ready as he sniffed the air and tasted the wind. But as the icy waves crashed onto the shore, Sophie realized they had bigger problems than invisible enemies. The cave she dreaded returning to, the place she and Dex had been drugged and dragged away from, sat half drowned by the high evening tide. Looks like we'll have to try again in the morning, Sander said, turning to head back. No, I have to get in touch with the Black Swan as soon as possible. It's about Sylvanie, she added before Sander could ask. If he knew it was actually about the rebels, he'd drag her straight to her room and probably barricade her inside. Sander breathed a squeaky sigh. You're positive you can reach them this way? They left me a note here once before, and I'm pretty sure they're still watching me. She hoped they were, anyway, which felt strange. Who knew she'd missed her Black Swan stalkers? Fine. Sander let the words stretch out like a groan as he held out his hand. Give me the note. I'll place it in there for you. I place it in there for you. A few piddly waves won't stop me. Sophie doubted a rampaging T-Rex could stop him, but as she reached into her pocket, she discovered another detail she hadn't really thought all the way through. Do you happen to have a pen? The look Sander gave her could have withered flowers, but he dug a white pencil out of his ankle pocket and handed it to her. Tell me you brought paper. Of course, it wasn't necessarily paper she'd wanted to use, but it would do the job. She slipped the Black Swan's note from the green vial and flipped it over to the back. I assume you'll be explaining where you found the ones that once were done here and why it reeks of humans? Sander asked. Sophie kept her eyes focused on the paper as she nodded. Not only was she not looking forward to telling Sander about teleporting to the Forbidden Cities, but she was realizing that she'd forgotten to explain it to Alden as well. She'd have to find a chance to tell him before he heard about it from Lord Cassius. Better hurry, Sander told her as the waves soaked them up into to their ankles. The tide is still rising. I'm trying, she said, hastily scribbling the only thing she could think of. It wasn't particularly clever, and it definitely didn't rhyme, but she still made it clear that it was time for the Black Swan to come out wherever they'd been hiding. Things are happening, and I need your help. When and where can we meet? Sanders called when he read what she'd written, but all he said was, wait here, as he headed toward the cave, and I expect you to sing the whole time I'm gone. Sophie laughed. Oh wait, you're serious? Of course I'm serious. It's how I'll know you're not in trouble. Sophie was about to argue that she could just scream if there were danger, but then she remembered the sweet-smelling cloth the kidnappers had pressed over her nose and mouth, knocking her out and cold. The only thing she could think to sing was a cheesy song her sister used to torment her with, a single verse repeated over and over about how the song never actually ended. She was on the 10th repetition by the time Sander was back at her side. That's going to be stuck in my head for the rest of my life, he grumbled. You're the one who told me to sing. He didn't return the smile. You tucked the note somewhere they'll be able to see it, right? She asked. The back of the cave has a small indent partway up the wall, well above the tide line, but still low enough to see. If they're watching, there's no way they'll miss it. The house was dark when Sophie and Sander made it back to Havenfield, the only light a faint glow coming from the second floor. Sophie had the feeling she knew which room it was coming from, and as she made her way up the winding stairs, she braced for the worst. 16 years ago, Grady and Edeline had lost their only daughter in a suspicious fire, and they'd left her room closed off ever since, only going in on their darkest, loneliest days. It felt like a shadow hung over the wing of the house, warning everyone to stay away. But when Sophie entered the dusty bedroom, she found Edeline deep in discussion with two of the gnomes that lived in a grove of tree houses on the property. Edeline's simple turquoise gown was the exact same shade as her eyes, which weren't the least bit red or puffy, and her whole face lit up with a smile when she spotted Sophie. I was wondering when you'd be home, Edeline said, her smile fading as she got a closer look at Sophie's clothes. Do you want to know why you're wet? Nothing dangerous, Sophie promised, wishing her shoes didn't squish it quite so loudly as she crossed the room to examine a row of trunks on the floor. What's going on? Oh, we were just trying to decide what to do with this room once it's all cleaned out. I was thinking maybe a conservatory since Jolie always loved gardens, but Gerda's not sure if the lightning's really light. Right. Sorry. A gnome in an earth-toned smock smiled at Sophie with bright green teeth. It can be done if you truly desire it, she told Edeline in a dry, scratchy voice, but we'll be limited in what we can grow. Gnomes were expert gardeners, probably because they were almost plant-like themselves. They drew all their nourishment from the sun and needed very little sleep, which was why they chosen to live with the elves. They exchanged their unneeded produce for protection and filled their long waking hours by helping with any other tasks the elves needed. You're really getting rid of everything? Sophie asked. Adeline had mentioned this plan once before, but Sophie hadn't expected her to actually go through with it. Jolie's room had been a shrine, completely unchanged since her death, right down to the page markers in the dusty books and the pots of lip gloss on the dressing table. It's time, Adeline said quietly. She ran her hand over the lacy bedspread, then backed a few steps away. We should have it all packed up tonight, the other gnome, wearing what looked like overalls woven out of grass, told her. Where do you want us to put the trunks when we're done? In my office, if you can find room. Sophie doubted they would. She'd been in Adeline's office once, and it was the place where stuff goes to die. But she was glad Adeline wasn't planning to actually get rid of Jolie's things. Still, as Sophie watched Gerda grab the first trunk and head to Jolie's closet, she couldn't stop herself from saying, Wait, maybe I should do it. Prentice had shown Sophie a strange, almost vision-like memory when she'd tried to read his shattered mind, and ever since, she'd wondered if Jolie had somehow been connected to the Black Swan. She hadn't mentioned it to Grady or Edeline, wanting to wait until she understood Jolie's involvement, and her best chance of finding out the truth was to search Jolie's things. Are you sure? Edeline asked. This is a huge project. The only reason the gnomes can take it out in a night is because they'll have dozens of them. I know, I just thought it would give me a chance to get to know Jolie a little better. Adeline smiled, but sadness seemed to leak out of the corners. You want to know Jolie? Is that okay? Sophie asked. Of course it's okay. In fact, she dabbed her eyes. I think it's wonderful. And I know Jolie would have wanted to know you too. You remind me so much of her. Sophie never knew what to do with that compliment. She had no doubt that Grady and Adeline loved her. She just hoped they were really seeing her for who she was, not for who they wanted her to be. Okay, Adeline said, clearing the thickness from her throat and turning to the gnomes. I guess I won't be needing your help tonight after all. Thank you so much for offering. They both nodded and shuffled away. And you should get out of those soggy clothes, she told Sophie, nudging her toward the door. I'll send your dinner up when it's ready. Sophie's bedroom took up the entire third floor and was bigger than every room in her old San Diego house. Combined star-shaped crystals dangled from the ceiling, and they glowed to life when Sophie snapped her fingers, illuminating a crushed trail in the fragile flowers woven into her carpet. Someone was here, Sophie whispered, freezing in the doorway. But her worry quickly melted into a giggle when she spotted the neon orange poof in the cage on her desk. Dex died Iggy again. Sander nodded. He asked if he could stop by her room before he went home. Said he'd made the poor creature suffer with pink ringlets long enough. Actually, Sophie's pet imp had quite enjoyed chewing on the hot pink curls Dex had given him a few weeks before, but he seemed to be having just as much fun chomping on his bright orange dreads. I don't think Dex is ever going to let you go back to your normal gray, Sophie warned the tiny creature as she let him out of his cage. Iggy flitted to her shoulder with his black bat-like wings and squeaked, making her gag from the toxic Iggy breath. So, Sanders said as a tray of food appeared out of nowhere on Sophie's bed, courtesy of Edeline's conjuring. Ready to tell me where you really went today? And before you consider leaving out any details, need I remind you that your trackers will tell me the whole story when you check them. Is that the only thing the trackers do? She asked, still trying to figure out why the rebels would bother tracking Sylvanie. You can't use them to stun me or something, right? Sanders snorted, though it sounded more like a laugh. Believe me, Miss Foster, if I were capable of incapacitating you, I would do it every time you and Kiev got one of your crazy schemes. Trackers simply gather information and help me find you should I need to. Why do you ask? And that's for all trackers? She pressed, avoiding his question. The silver ones aren't different? What do you mean silver ones? Did you find a silver tracker? Not on me. I found one on Sylvanie. Sander reached for his sword as Sophie explained about Greyfell and the rebels and the unidentified footprints outside the sanctuary. Each new detail made him grip the hilt tighter until his skin was stretched to thin. She was sure it would tear. What? She asked, taking a deep breath to brace for the bad news she could tell was coming. Are the silver trackers more dangerous? Trackers can't be made from silver, Sander whispered, because of the way the metal tarnishes. The tracker you found could only have been made from stock and tin, a metal that isn't sold and isn't shared. The only creatures who use it are those who mine it, and it can only be mined in the deepest caves of an underground mountain in the heart of Ravagog, the ogre's largest and most powerful city.